Hello, everybody, and welcome to a first for the Substack, which is an actual live or recorded interview with somebody. I thought I'd start with Amy Gallagher, who is the marvelous nurse who is standing up to bullying in the NHS. This is particularly poignant today, given that Helen Joyce was on BBC A Woman's Hour this morning, being absolutely marvelous. And I would like her to explain to us. I think I should explain to her first. We, the Substack, we are what we call the lovely corner of the internet. So we are all the lovelies.
Right.
Hilary and Sue have been working together to make us even more charming graphics. And we are just very accepting and tolerant. No one, even if people disagree with you, no one will be rude to you here. That is not how we work. So feel free to speak honestly, because we're much more interested in honest opinion. And that is much more intellectually satisfying than just saying things because you think it looks good. So feel free to talk.
That's
And
fine. Thank
to
you.
be not to begin with, Amy, let me just ask you to just assume some of the lovelies have never heard of you and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm got two live cases now against the NHS. So I kind of was in the media several years ago because of my legal case against the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust. So I was trained to be a psychotherapist in that there. I was in my final year of training, and I basically disagreed with critical race theory. So it was kind of around the time of Black Lives Matter, and they were like pushing it like so much. All of this stuff about white privilege and white people are racist. And I just said, look, some people don't think like this, and we need to be aware of that because we're treating people in the NHS. And from that point onwards, I was just, I mean, they raised a student conduct policy against me because my thinking wasn't sufficiently anti-racist. And then there was real bullying. One of the teachers gave a pre-written speech to other students saying how we need to be wary of oppressive speech that rejects white privilege. And she was referring to me. And then eventually they deemed me unsafe to be with patients. So that's my first case. That's still ongoing. That's in the county court. Um, and then, I mean, I've been working as a nurse still. I'm a mental health nurse. I've been working in the NHS for 10 years now. And then I got into trouble again. It makes me sound like I'm a troublemaker, but I don't want to tell people that it's the trouble's being done to me. I'm not the one causing the trouble.
Yes, let's pause there because it is a common tactic of abusers and psychopaths to blame the victim. And we do need to go back to not blaming the victim. And there is a bit of a culture. One of the reasons that the bad people are empowered is that some of the good people will buy into this nonsense and think if you cause a fuss, it must be you who's caused the problem. But actually, it might just be that the nutters are screaming because they're nutters.
Yeah, I mean, the NHS is so conformist. And in both my instances, it was kind of mostly women that I was dealing with. It was like a group, and it was huge amounts of groupthink. So if you just challenge ideas, they just think that there's something weird or wrong with you and that you're just out for like getting attention. It's a very strange, and yeah, I mean, what you're saying is very interesting about abuse. It did feel abusive actually too. I don't want to kind of play the victim too much, but it was psychologically quite hard actually when a whole institution is telling you you are wrong and you're saying things that are terrible and you know you're not. It's a very, very hard thing to go through. So yeah, I mean, last year, so what happened to me, this is kind of my recent case that I've been speaking about, was that I mean, as I said, I work in mental health and I tweet about DEI in the NHS. I'm against it. I'm against critical race theory and gender ideology. So
Can
I've
you give
spoken.
us, can you just give us some examples of what the NHS is saying and doing? Because many of us don't know.
Yeah, oh my gosh, they're still pushing, and people don't realize it's still happening now. Critical race theory and gender ideology so much. So you have these big pride months where everybody wears their pronouns. I've worked in trusts where you're asked to ask the patient their pronouns, even if they're not transgender or whatever. I was asked to, at the height of the Black Lives Matter, I was asked to ask my patients how they feel about the Black Lives Matter protests. I've been sent emails telling me there's
Sorry, you were asked to ask ill people what
yeah.
they thought about a political protest.
Yeah, and if it had affected them and if they wanted to talk about it, even though
Right.
that's what they're there
See,
for.
this is what I call the breakdown in impartiality, which I won't bore you with. But if impartiality worked, people would know that doctors and nurses shouldn't raise politics with patients. of any
I
type.
know,
I
exactly.
don't care what it is, just none. I mean, it came in with the rainbow lanyards. And
Yeah.
I always like to point out as a bisexual that you don't need a rainbow lanyard. Unless you're actively discriminating against me, I'm assuming we're okay. You know, that's where I am in a civilized society. So this is absolutely shocking behavior by the NHS who don't understand impartiality.
Yeah, I've been encouraged to be like a trans LGBT ally and wear a badge and didn't want to wear the badge. And then it was kind of like I experienced hostility for not wearing the badge. So it's all of
Absolutely no one should have to wear a badge just
uh,
because am same-sex attracted as well as opposite sex attracted. You don't need
it,
to wear a badge. Why
it's
should
so
I
bizarre.
force you to do anything?
It's so bizarre. And I was just say, like, homophobia or kind of racism, these really weren't problems in the NHS. Before all of this woke stuff came in, like, I found the NHS to be extremely tolerant. There's a real mix of people. And just this just wasn't a problem. So it did feel like an invented problem. But I mean, even more recently, like last year, there was an email that went round that was a workshop for thinking about internalized racism, and it was for BAME staff only. So presumably if you're not BAME, whatever that means, you can't go to it. And it's like, but why would you separate? And it just makes everyone feel uncomfortable. Everybody notices it, especially if you're in a team where there's lots of different people of different ethnicities. Like people notice that like no posters for like BAME staff, and nobody really talks about it, but you can notice that everybody's a bit like, what,
Well, that's
not,
because we're British and we're not racist, and we never
yeah.
really were. I mean, when the Americans came over during the war and they tried to impose racial segregation, there are so many examples of the British just going, "Nope, not having that. They're perfectly welcome in our pub, thank you." And it's just not in our nature to separate out in this way. Our
Mm.
sin really is always been the class divide, but it's not part of in our nature. My theory, just to drop this on you so you don't need to respond, but is that the DEI people need to promote racism. They need to promote homophobia because that then justifies their job.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are so many DEI jobs now in the NHS. I mean, we've all seen these examples of people on such high salaries or in a DEI role. And they do have to increasingly find things to justify their job. And it's like sticking up posters of trans flags. Like that's going to help anyone already. It's just like, oh, we've done something. And it just annoys everyone. So yeah, this is, I mean, as I said, I've been talking about this for a long time. I'm still talking about it. I thought it would be over by now, but it is still happening. I think people think because we were having kind of legal wins, and things are changing a bit politically, but I don't think they realize that in the NHS the culture has not changed at all. So I mean, so my recent case that I was just about to talk about was so it was only last year that I was pulled up and told that I had had complaints about me because of tweets I'd made, where I was literally just criticizing the Progress Pride flag. Like I
Right.
wasn't criticizing people. There was a picture of it with McDonald's signs on it. So it was kind of McDonald's branded flag, and I just put the word hell above it, right? So I'm
Yeah.
criticizing kind of like woke capitalism or McDonald's use of an
Yeah.
ideology,
And it is
right?
woke capitalism. That's the right
Yeah,
phrase. I also
yeah,
use the phrase corporate socialism. What you've got is big business and government are both self-interested in preserving the status quo, and that the big business signals its submission to government by engaging in this political nonsense, and
yeah,
the government then uses its power to protect that business from competition. That's what's going on. But
yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely disgraceful. Of course, you can criticize any flag. That's what's wrong with that. And
Oh,
the point I always make about the progress flag is that only the original gay pride flag is one that is exempt from requiring planning permission. The progress flag, or so-called progress flag, because many of us don't feel it is progressive, it requires planning permission. Not that anybody ever picks up on that, because we're living through rule collapse. But so what happened to you after you'd sent this? They come up to you, they say, this is
yeah.
your
They
private Twitter.
So there's my private Twitter. They said that a transgender and a non-binary patient had Googled me and found it, and they said that they felt distressed by this tweet. And they had told some of my colleagues that they felt distressed by this tweet. And then some of my colleagues had then also complained and said they didn't feel comfortable working with me. So I was pulled into a meeting with my manager to begin with. And straight away, it was kind of like accusations of like homophobia, basically. Like, why are you so uncomfortable with the LGBT flag? Like, what is it about that group of people? And I was saying it's actually not about those people. This is about pushing an ideology. I was saying, the ideology pushes the idea that you can be born in the wrong body, or that gay and autistic children need medical treatment, or that women aren't entitled to single-sex spaces. It kind of essentially rejects the caste review. So that's my objection to this flag, and it's got And then I said, I'm actually criticizing like a corporation's use of it. But when I was explaining all of this, first of all, I got the sense that they looked at me like I was speaking gobbledygook. They didn't really, it was like they'd heard these ideas for the first time. So when I was mentioning like the CAS review or like Mayor for Starters legal win and things like that, they just didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I even said, we should be following the CAS review. And I'm worried that we're not. And my manager actually said, "Well, I've not heard anything about it. Management's not told me anything about it." And that
This
was
is
that.
this is an increasingly shocking response that I'm living through because I, like a sort of naive lawyer, just expect people to obey the law, and that we're clearly becoming a society that doesn't do that. And I'm utterly shocked at the moment. I mean, I mentioned the Woman's Hour program that Helen Joyce was on. It's the only one I'm going to listen to because the quality of Woman's Hour has completely fallen away. But they are running a series of different perspectives on the recent Supreme Court case. And that's just nonsense. You can't have a different perspective. Well, my perspective is that the case says that Stephen should be given yum yums every day. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, well, considering your perspective, Stephen, on the legal case. The case either
Yeah.
says what it says. And I think, Amy, that what they're trying to do is to attack truth and to destroy it. And that
Yeah.
that too gives a form of control.
Yeah, that as well. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned people don't always obey the law because I was kind of trying to make it easy for them. I was explaining that I have gender critical beliefs and they're protected in law. I was giving them cases. I was saying, look, this person said this and they won their case. And I was trying to make it easy for them to sort of back down and say, oh, she's got a point, right? Because I was saying, look, this is you're potentially legally discriminating against me here. So potentially don't, go ahead with persecuting me, maybe just stop. And they still carried on. They just sort of think that maybe you're making it up or that like, oh, I don't know, that the law doesn't apply to them. It's so bizarre. So they ended up getting this kind of external investigator to come in and it was unbelievable because I was explaining all of the things that the cash review and Kira Bell and all of these things and why I'm against the flag. And she was asking me questions like, do you think that the fact that you believe that a person can't be born in the wrong body, does that mean that a patient wouldn't be able to trust you or work with you? And I was like, what? Like that I'm talking about like a fact. Like you're making a metaphysical claim about like the body. Why would that have anything to do with whether a patient could work with me? And they even went as far as to say, does the fact that you disagree with gender ideology, don't you think that that could mean that a patient wouldn't be able to trust you and that you were betraying them? That I was betraying transgender patients by having gender critical views.
Yes, I mean
Um,
this is clearly nonsense, and it
yeah.
the best comparator I always think because this sounds like a new religion, but so let's go back to the old religions. Now I am a Christian, so I believe that Christ was God. I have many Jewish friends and many Muslim friends, neither of whom believe that Christ was God. Are they betraying me? Am I betraying them? I mean, what? This is just utter tosh. This is how you cause conflict. The way that we avoid conflict between me and my Jewish and my Muslim friends is that we just don't talk about that. Just why would we? It's not necessary. And I
Yeah,
think, sorry,
yeah, go on. No, go on, finish
I
off.
think this is about provoking conflict, not stopping it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to me, if like within the NHS, like transgender ideology does feel like a religion, and it's almost like you see signs of this religion plastered everywhere. And it's like if you did swap it for some kind of other religion, like Christianity or Islam, you'd think, oh my God, like of course we couldn't do that because
No,
like you.
it would become obvious.
It's so obvious. Like, of course, you can't just push one religion on everyone. And then anybody that disagrees or complains about it and says, well, like, I'm not comfortable with that. Or like, why is this nurse talking to me about their Christian beliefs? That's a bit weird. Like, why are they pushing this onto me? Most people would say, well, that's obvious, like we shouldn't be doing that. But with transgender ideology, you can talk about it as much as you want, push it as much as you want. And if anybody disagrees with it or says, actually, I don't think in that way, it's like they're a bigot and they're a heretic. It did feel religious, actually. It was so like people that had worked with me for years, like my manager had known me for a long time. She suddenly looked at me like I was like a demon. And I was thinking, but you know me, you've worked with me for so long. And
We're
I'm
not.
explaining, it's
We,
it's so yeah.
it must be heartbreaking because fundamentally we're not a very evolved species. We're actually quite young, and we are much closer in time to the witch burnings than we were to the invention of fire. This is part of who we are. And what's happened is that by getting rid of an established religion, in has come a replacement religion. And this is what Karl Marx knew, that this is why religion is the opiate of the masses. It's a drug, and he uses that drug to control them. And Karl Marx didn't want them worshipping Jesus Christ. Karl Marx wanted them worshipping him, because he's a narcissist. And what we've got in our narcissistic age is a bunch of copycat Marxists who all see themselves as utterly marvelous, and they would like to brainwash the public into worshipping. They're not bold enough yet to say them, but they are saying you worship this ideology. And if you can get people to, it's called the big lie. If you can get people to engage in a lie, because it is fundamentally a lie. A
Yeah.
man cannot change into a woman.
Yeah.
And I've got an old school transsexual mate who, the very first time I met him, and I'll talk about him as a him to you, because that I'm not going to try and impose anything on you. He literally said to me, I'm actually a man. And I went, yes, I know. And because I'm quite camp, I said, darling. And I said, but I don't mind. I'll call you. I don't mind. And but that was my choice. And he made it my choice. And what they're doing with their control is taking away your choice. You can't choose. You have to do as you're told.
It
Um, yeah.
I like the idea of the big lie because it really did feel like that in the NHS. Like what I was noticing, even this is post the cast review, right? We would be treating teenagers who had autism, they had a history of sexual abuse, and maybe they thought they were gay, and they were just straight away saying, "Oh, I'm a different gender. These are my pronouns. My pronouns are different from what I are. I've changed my name." And I was seeing clinicians just totally accepting that and saying this child is transgender. And they didn't have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. We didn't even know if it had been agreed with their parents or their parents knew about it. All of this is just accepted as fact because nobody thinks that they can challenge it. So then straight away, let's say a teenage girl who's got trauma and is autistic, straight away she's being referred to as a boy. And you see it in her patient notes. You see it in the way clinicians talk to each other. They call the girl he. And there is no curiosity. There's no like, well, let's actually have a discussion about this. Should we be going along with this? Like, do her parents know? Has this been agreed? Like, why are we doing this? Is this in line with the cast review? None of those questions are asked. It's just like we just have to go along with it. We can't question it. It's just if somebody says they are the opposite sex, they are, and you just
And
think this is so bizarre.
Well, and this is very damaging for our children, because
Mm,
I we do prayers at bedtime, because I'm trying to raise my child with the comfort of a religion, because I think I learned this from my Jewish and Muslim friends, that actually I see their kids being quite grounded and sensible, and I wanted my child to be quite grounded and sensible. So I'm raising my child inside a faith, inside Christianity, and we pray. And one of the people we pray for, you probably know, is Charlie Bentley Astor,
oh yeah,
who,
yeah.
because she thought about it, and she explains this in a very interesting way. She says that went through puberty quite earlier than she could really deal with. She was getting male sexual attention, and she didn't
Mm,
want it. And she thought that this was a way to get rid of it and to make it
mm,
go away. And you do see this with girls. I think, and that's perfectly acceptable. I understand that position, and they put her on puberty blockers, and this is the reason we pray for her, because they don't now know if she can have children.
no, it's awful. And I mean, there's so many people in this position as well.
Yeah, we
And
are
it's not,
mutilating our kids.
yeah, it's not acknowledged by the NHS whatsoever. Nobody ever talks about detransitioners. There's never a training day about detransitioners or how to work with them. They're just not, there's complete absence about detransitioners. And it's so sad. They'll have a transgender awareness day, but nothing about all of these young people that have had their bodies damaged. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I always think, what must it be like that when I go into work, into a hospital, and I see that big Progress Pride flag outside? The thing that makes me so angry is what must it be like for someone like Charlie or a detransitioner to go into that hospital knowing that they're still waving the flag, which represents ideas that have destroyed their life.
Yeah.
Like it's
I mean,
awful.
I don't want to traumatize people on the Substack, but you can find pictures of the damage, the physical damage that is done to innocent and perhaps confused children. I mean, I was just to talk about my own experience. You know, I grew up in the 80s when same-sex attracted people were not largely accepted. So, like quite a lot of people, I was in the closet. So I simply denied that I found men attractive for quite some time until I think I was about 20. And then because it wasn't very well, nothing was really known or talked about. We had Graham Norton and we had just had Queer as Folk, but we hadn't, got anything else. And I just assumed that meant I was gay. And so I came out as gay. And then 6 months later, I had to re-come out as a girl. These things are as I was bisexual because I fancied a girl as she walked past. These are very confusing times. And
Yeah,
if somebody
yeah.
is wandering around saying, "Oh, actually, you're in the wrong body," I do worry about what I might have been persuaded to do to myself.
Yeah, and this is being these words and these terms are being used in relation to very young teenagers, like 14, 15, and you think nobody knows what they want or who they you go through all sorts of, you explore actually during that time. You explore like what your desires are and what you like, and you kind of then it kind of settles a bit into your 20s, like you think, oh, now I know what I am. But they're coming out as though they're transgender, so that is now set in stone. That's what I am and you've got to accept it and you can't even ask any questions about it. And you think, and because the society is everybody's scared to question it, this poor person just has no space to develop or explore anything. They're just given this identity and then the whole world around them, agrees with them and then that's it. So it's heartbreaking to see this happening to young people. Like I was, even up to a year ago, like we had a caseload of patients, like young teenagers with, mental health problems. And at times you would see maybe like a third of them identifying as transgender or non-binary.
Bless
And
them.
that was just like, you didn't even see that 10 years before. It's just exploded.
No.
And yeah, and nobody will talk to them about what that means, what it means to be what are they actually communicating when they say they're transgender? Like what does that mean to you? People won't even ask that question because it's like, oh, they're transgender, that's that.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah.
And I think that another interesting stat for the lovelies on the Substack is that anorexia has fallen off a cliff. So it's now very
Really?
uncommon. Yeah, it's almost like it's been directly replaced with
Wow.
identifying as a trans because it's particularly common amongst girls and young girls. I don't want to get too graphic, but in order to commit
Yeah.
to it, a man has to take quite bold steps. And I think most men would perhaps not be that willing or enthusiastic to take. Now, tell everybody how they can help.
Yeah, so you can find out about my case against, so it's against South London Maudsley. This is where I've been put through a kind of a year-long investigation process. They've now recently said that they're not continuing with the investigation. But the point is, if you've got gender critical views, you shouldn't have to go for a year-long investigation. It should just be, well, you're allowed to express those views. So that's the point I'm making with this legal case. So it's discrimination on the basis of gender critical belief. Obviously, we've had these recent wins with the Supreme Court and Higgs versus Farmers School and various other cases. So you can find out more about my case. If you Google Crowd Justice Amy Gallagher, you'll be able to find it pretty quickly. It should come up top on Google and you can fill my crowd fund and you can just read about it. And you could donate or even just sharing it, tweeting it, or whatever is really helpful. So,
Yes, we
yeah,
should never have got to this position where the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom has to say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And yeah, hopefully, I think that that's going to help me be successful in this case. That we have had quite a few recent wins and things going in our direction. But I do still think it's important that we stand up and challenge these things. That's why I'm doing it. I mean, it's very stressful going for a legal case, but you just think if you don't do it, I don't know. I just sort of feel like, well, I'm not. No, I have to do something. I don't know how you can not, because you just have to live with the kind of injustice, and I can't really. I'm not really. I can't do that. So that's why.
I
So
think it's
that's why.
marvelous. I think it's so impressive, and there are so many amazing women in this arena who have stood up and who have really carried it through. And it's just, I mean, the abuse that J.K. Rowling gets, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Oh,
As though I mean, she's literally one of the sweetest people in the world. I mean, it's just, it's like, it's just mad. It's absolutely mad. So
yeah.
thank you very much for doing this. I will put links in all the relevant places so that people have got those. And thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story. I can tell you right now, the lovelies will be outraged because
Okay.
it's not on. It's not
Mm,
cricket.
mm.
Thank you.